Hi, everybody. I'm Julianna Forlano. This is Act Now. Sorry we're a little late, but I'm happy to be here with you. We have an amazing show for you today. I could not be happier to have David Neiwert coming on the program to discuss, just in time for your Thanksgiving dinner, the intersection of Christianity and fascism and the rise of the Christian fascist movement. Do you know who David Neiwert is? Do you? Okay, let me just tell you, because I think that you should, especially if you've been watching this show. David Neiwert is an American freelance journalist. He is the first one to warn us of the rise of fascism in the United States, and he was punished and marginalized for doing so. And look where we are. Look where we are. Anyway, David's the author of several books, including In God's Country, The Patriot Movement, and the Pacific Northwest. And he wrote that in 1999. Do you know what I looked like in 1999? This. Okay? That. What were you doing in 1999? All right, I fudged the numbers there. There's not exactly what I look like in 1999. But seriously, he has been hot on the trail of the rise of the fascist movement here in the United States for decades. His more recent works, I think the latest book is Red Pill, Blue Pill, How to Counteract the Conspiracy Theories That Are Killing Us. And he also wrote Alt America, The Rise of the Radical Right in the Age of Trump. After David joins us, we are having a nice long conversation with Jocelyn McCurdy-Keats about happiness in the United States and what social structures in other people's governments make for a happy place to be. I had the opportunity to talk with Dr. Harriet Fraud, psychotherapist and host of Capitalism Hits Home, about this very same topic. I'm going to be giving you some really juicy parts of that interview within my talk with Jocelyn as well. So stay tuned. It is going to be a great show. First up, David Neiwert. Hello. Happy to be here with you. David Neiwert is going to join us today. He is the American freelance journalist and author of several books, including Red Pill, Blue Pill, How to Counteract the Conspiracy Theories That Are Killing Us. He also wrote Alt America, The Rise of the Radical Right in the Age of Trump. And we are all going to be sitting across the Thanksgiving table with people whose politics we may or may not agree with. I just thought it might be a good idea to maybe have a conversation about where we are with Christians and the rise of Christian fascism in this country. Who better to talk to than David Neiwert? David, thanks for joining me on the program.
Always a pleasure to be here, Juliana. How are you doing?
Well, okay. I'm going to Thanksgiving at a relative's house who in the other room usually is Fox News is playing. So
that's really hard. Yeah. Especially nowadays because Fox is encouraging people to believe utterly false information and, including the kind of false information that led people to attack the Capitol on January 6th. So,
you've been following these alt-right movements for, I gave you lots of credit at the upfront. For a really long time. Where are we on the plane of, march toward full-on fascism?
I think we're in a really dangerous time, mainly because of what I'm seeing out there in response to not just the January 6th insurrection, but things like the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. The fact is, I mean, the New York Times very much soft pedaled it by saying that what the Rittenhouse verdict did was revive the talk amongst the radical right about an armed response to protesters. And, that's not the full picture of what they're saying. They're talking about what they're celebrating is the fact that Kyle Rittenhouse killed protesters, and they are encouraging. They're saying they're basically saying he's our hero, he's our model. Let's go out and do the same, which is to say, let's go out and shoot protesters. And that's certainly what we're seeing on right-wing social media right now. There's this huge rush of people talking about, telling leftists, yeah, you're just going to get Rittenhouse. That's the new phrase for them. And they've been talking about civil war increasingly. They started talking about it during the Trump years. And of course, it was actually this long-standing myth on the radical right for a long time that this was their ultimate goal, was to spark a civil war, a race war, whatever you want to call it. And but it really intensified during the past year, especially after Trump lost. And that, of course, is what, in many ways, that was what the January 6th insurrectionists were about. When they yelled 1776, they meant this is the new revolution. And so we're I think these people have been fantasizing about it. I think they've been building up their guns to do it.
That's no good.
And I think a lot of them are ready to go out and start shooting their neighbors.
Yeah, well, so happy Thanksgiving to everyone. The interesting part about this is that many of them are Christians, and they're talking about being Christian. I have a clip, and it's not in order, Giancarlo. Giancarlo's our producer behind the scenes. Giancarlo, can you play the Texas in a minute? I'm going to call up for the clip from the University of North Texas, where there's a young guy who runs a YouTube page who started, he was doing a protest, and he literally, you'll hear him yell out, "What is wrong with Christian fascism? I'm radicalizing the youth, and you can't do anything about it." Let's take a look.
What is wrong with Christian fascism? Hey, make sure you get this guy. Go ahead and get my face. I have a YouTube channel with 300,000 subscribers. And I am radicalizing the youth, and you can do nothing about it. You better be nice, because when we take power...
Terrifying. All right, let's pull the volume down on that, because I'd love to never hear that again. But David, what are your thoughts about this incident? And this is obviously not an isolated incident across the country.
Yeah. No, we've been seeing a lot of this kind of talk. I mean, there was a piece in Claremont Institute magazine earlier this year where one of the leading, this is their right-wing think tank, a pro-Trump think tank, that is where one of their main writers was arguing that for an ethos of fundamentally that sort of Christian fascism. He didn't call it that, but it was exactly that, and being unapologetic and using violence and just seizing power and not apologizing for it, which is that's fundamentally what fascism did. So it always has done.
I find it really, are none of them aware that Christianity in its, real form, not in its,
Hitler is a Christian, so there's nothing particularly new. But obviously, I think but
it is particularly ironic. If you just read the red words in the Bible, the ones that Jesus said, that means you're for the poor, you're for the meek, you're not a fascist, you're not, No,
there's none of that. But these are people who have developed this idea of Christian warriors for 20 years. And so they see Jesus as this warlike figure, not as a bringer of peace. Their idea of peace is when all their enemies are dead. That's peace. And
are they just mad that somebody killed Jesus? Like
no,
what?
No, they don't even think about that. What they think about is that somebody other than Christians is running the world. That's their concern. They don't care. The theology and the actual beliefs are just sort of surface decoration for fundamentally authoritarian worldview.
So it's really just the Crusades all over again.
Yeah.
It certainly seems like there's far more of us than there are of them. Why? What is going on in the U.S. that is allowing them to have so much, to have such a quick rise?
Well, a couple of things. Obviously the internet's played a major role.
Yeah, I mentioned the internet
in the ability of extremists of all stripes to not only organize and get in touch with each other and continue their sort of radicalization arc, but to recruit and, as I say, to actually organize stuff on the ground. And that's a huge thing. I think the fact that this is being normalized by mainstream media, particularly, of course, right-wing mainstream media, and I use that term loosely, but that's what Fox News is, and of course, supposedly that's what OAN and Newsmax are, but they're not.
We had a guest on, Joe Sorrentino. I'm sure you know him. He's like from Plowshares, and now he's at I'm forgetting, but he's a national security expert, and he was saying that that the New York, he wouldn't use disparaging language when talking about something with the New York Times because they wouldn't print it. And I'm like, isn't it time for the New York Times to use some disparaging language? I mean, you did mention how they soft pedaled the Rittenhouse case. What's the complicity of the left media or the regular mainstream corporate media in not taking measures more seriously here? Right.
And that's what I was about to say. Of course, the right-wing media is taking a leading role in this. Fox News is just peddling straight up disinformation and encouraging this arc of radicalization. Whereas what the mainstream media are doing, the ones that they accuse of being leftist, of being liberal media, are actually busily normalizing this, because these corporate media in general are really invested in the idea of simultaneously stirring up controversy, because controversy means revenues for them, and continuing the idea that everything's normal, that everything will be the same, that we are invested
to keep the market from plunging when people are like, fascist attack, what is that? Right, why is that?
Exactly. And so CNN and even MSNBC, where I used to work, they still are playing this, everything's going to be just fine, everything's going to be normal, don't worry about it, we'll just continue along, and don't pay too much attention to those people calling out the fascists and calling them fascists, because we don't want to hear that. And it's very blinkered. And the problem with that is that not only is it blinkered, but it convinces the rest of society to be blinkered. There's a whole population out there, Julianna, that doesn't pay attention to politics, that doesn't watch your show or anybody else's shows.
Look at these numbers. What are you talking about?
And certainly don't read my work. So who just don't pay attention.
But they think they're paying attention because they read the Times. So they feel like that's attention. They're like, I read the Times. It's the paper of note. Oh, wait, no, I'm lefty, or I'm reading the Washington Post, the paper of note. Yeah. And,
well, yeah. But
they're not watching this. I'm going to show some videos here from Hagee's church down in Texas. Do you want to set us up with the role that he's been playing, drumming up hate?
Yeah, Hagee, since the Bush years, has been a major nexus for right-wing Christian nationalist organizing. And of course, they love to use Israel as, we're friends with Israel, to sort of shield themselves from the pretty clear and obvious anti-Semitism that underlies a lot of their conspiracist beliefs. And of course, the reason they love Israel is they want it to be the site of the apocalypse,
Right. Yeah.
they love all kinds of dead Hebrew folks, I think.
It's just absolutely insane. Okay, so here, Giancarlo, we've got Giancarlo's in the background. We have a bunch of stuff. So first off, we'll just play. This is. Let's play the one. Let's go, Brandon. Now, let's go, Brandon is what people are shouting, but when they're too Christian to say "fuck Biden." That's really what that came out of. It's this idea
Well, they
that
think they're being clever.
Yeah, they think they're being clever, and it's like, yeah, I know. Like the Christians, they don't like swearing. So
No.
here's. Let's get So basically, this is a whole religious congregation being egged on from the pulpit to say a coded "fuck Biden."
Yeah. Well, it's all part of. I mean, I got to tell you, a lot of the guys running around with "fuck Biden" flags on their pickups will also claim to be Christian. Trust me on this.
And they will say "fuck." They're not above it.
Yeah. Especially a lot of the militia types who claim that they're, on a Christian jihad, and the ones who show up at Proud Boy gatherings, they'll all claim to be Christians. I mean, that was what these Patriot Prayer events that were basically Proud Boy events that we had on the West Coast for 4 years were about. I mean, the guy who led them with Joey Gibson would get up and spout all this stuff out of the Bible and claim that this is what that God wanted. And then, what God wanted was for them to go out and beat people up on the streets in Portland, because that's what they did.
Well, it's right there in Leviticus. And thou shalt beat the hippies in front of the donut shop. In front of Harvey's
the Canaanites.
All right, not that I want to subject anyone to any more Hagee, but I just, when I was watching these things, I don't go to these churches. I read news reports about them, but to see them live, I think is really.
Did you see the viral clip of the young man who stood up at the Charlie Kirk gathering in Idaho a couple of weeks ago and asked Charlie Kirk, so what I want to know is, when do we get to use the guns?
Yeah.
How many more elections are these people going to steal before we could start to kill them?
Right. And the Politico didn't say, "Oh, now come on, let's chill." He did.
He said, "Oh, let's chill," but the problem is they'll just use that against you. Don't be like that. Yes, keep it private.
He said it's a good question, right? Didn't he?
Well, no, legislator. There was a legislator, an Idaho
exactly.
legislator, said, "Oh yeah, that's a good question." And
that's insane.
I can tell you, as somebody who monitors these guys pretty closely, that's not an unusual question for these guys. This is actually the main topic of conversation on the radical right now, is when do they get to start using the guns, and when and how. And Kyle Rittenhouse just gave them a big fat green light. It gave them permission.
Okay, so
I think we're going to be seeing a fair amount of lethal gun violence around any kind of left-wing protests going forward, and that's concerning.
Where do you think that goes? Where do you think that? What do you think that does for the left, or even the center? You would think the center would also be against, fascism in the country.
Yeah, well, the center doesn't think it's possible. That's the problem.
That is the problem. We did talk about that.
The center thinks, "Oh, this can't happen here. It's going to be normal." That's what I mean about how the media is invested in this continued normalcy thing, and I'm just here to tell you, normal's a very long ways away.
Actually, that makes a good point. I'm going to let Hagee make that point for us as well. Okay. We have a couple of other videos I'd like to show, and I appreciate your time on this, Dave, because I know you've worked hard on this. And you've been the clarion call for a reality check, and everything you said so far has come true. So at the end of this, I'm going to want maybe some of your predictions, but not like crystal ball predictions, more like what should we be looking out for, and maybe what actions you think the left can take. We're already doing our best here on Act TV to actually discuss this openly. Let's take a look at Hagee talking about, his that we should all be concerned about a civil war and we should all be ready to foment one.
America is now in a civil war. We are greatly divided. And I saw both groups as I exited the White House gathering. Mobs with weapons of war are ready to slaughter the innocent.
I don't think so.
Cities are ablaze. Policemen are murdered and dishonored. Crime and criminals are being glorified. Our constitutional rights are being trampled under feet. Many of our political leaders are godless and corrupt. They have put almost 4 years intentionally lied about the President of the United States. America's only hope for survival is a return to righteousness. And how do the righteous get an authority? It's when the righteous get up and go vote for righteous people.
Okay, I just threw up a little in my mouth just listening to that. I mean, really, he's just, how do the Christians get around the fact that Trump is basically, they was going against all of their rules up until he became their leader?
Well, authoritarianism is a powerful drug, and it actually produces, I think, cognitive changes in people, which is why somebody who is gorged on Fox News and right-wing media will sit and watch the same thing that you and I can watch and come away with a completely different understanding of what they just watched, because they're seeing it through a very, very different lens. And that's this authoritarian lens. And the authoritarian lens is that first, whatever Donald says is true, and that anybody who calls him a liar is a liar, right? I mean, that's a predicate. At least for them. Because Trump's the authoritarian figure around which is all this is revolving.
Right.
However, he's not. People usually, when they think about authoritarianism, they deal with that authoritarian figure, the leader. But the real phenomenon of authoritarianism is the army of authoritarian followers who do their bidding. And not only do their bidding, but they take on a life of their own, as we've seen. Fox News had a lot to do with building up this authoritarianism during the Bush years. I mean, that was what my book Eliminationism was, the Eliminationists was talking about, was how during the Bush years, we just this incredible amount of increasingly authoritarian and eliminationist talk. And, the two are basically work together. And that's what
are you talking about when you talk about eliminationism? Just for
eliminationism is rhetoric and sort of politics that's all around eliminate. It uses rhetoric that demonizes and dehumanizes other people,
getting rid of groups
to the point that they are only objects fit for elimination. And that it's very common. I mean, there's a long history of it in the United States, and there is, and it certainly got its revival during those Bush years, and now it's just woven in. I mean, that's what the Civil War is all about.
Here's Hagee talking about Marxism and critical race theories being taught in our schools. See if you can count
the greatest freedom is not free. Thomas Jefferson said the tree of liberty must be watered by the blood of every generation. On July the 4th, 1776, freedom was born, but it was paid for in the blood, the sweat, and tears of our founding fathers. My question to you, those of you who are here and those of you who are watching by television, is there anything you believe worth putting your life or your reputation in jeopardy to save our nation?
Oh, well, that was a different video, but that was my big closer. That was my big closer video. Is he not asking people to, yeah, I mean, he said to put your life, that means war, and your reputation, which means like go out and maybe get your face in something on social media and they'll smear you and maybe you'll lose your job, but it's worth it. And here's my question, David. Nothing there he's saying makes sense. Like, aren't they mad at America? They're, I thought they didn't actually like America. And so now they're saying we've got to save.
Well, what they actually hate is democracy. What they hate is the idea of democracy. And that's why this is fundamentally an attack and a war on our democratic institutions. That's what this has always been about. That they want to replace democracy with authoritarian rule by Donald Trump, and dictator for life.
I always feel like it's
president for life, Donald Trump.
The way they talk about us in the other video, I'll show you in a second. The Marxists. I mean, am I a Marxist?
Yeah.
I just think we should share. The way they demonize, they're demonizing more than just like people of color, or not that that's not bad enough, but they're demonizing the New York Times readers. If you think you're not in the crosshairs, you literally are in the crosshairs. Anyone who wants a social safety net, you're a communist. Anyone,
Yeah. I mean, they talk about helicopter rights for communists, and then these very same people are the ones who claim that Joe Biden is a communist. They have zero understanding of the world, zero nuance, but that's okay because that's their project. Everybody who is opposed to them ultimately becomes a target, and that's what this is about: is eliminating their opposition. And it's just like I say, it's very much an attack on democracy. And just think about how many of these people, they all retort to you, well, it's not a democracy, it's a republic, right? That's their standard retort. This is a line that was actually concocted by the John Birch Society back in the 1960s. And it probably has its roots in racist Billy Joe Hargis types back in the 40s. But this was always the standard response. And now it's become very much embedded belief. So this is why when you say you were trying to, your insurrection January 6th was an attack on democracy, they'll say, well, this isn't a democracy. This is a republic.
Yeah. Right.
And that just, and it just tells you it really reveals their actual hostility to democracy. And I think that's a lot of what we're looking at.
Maybe 5, 8, or maybe about 8 years ago, maybe in 1999, when you wrote that book trying to warn everybody. No, it was actually when Michael Brown was shot dead in the street in Ferguson. Remember, it was right around Thanksgiving time, if I remember correctly, or maybe a bit before. And the protests were happening. And I remember going to a Thanksgiving meal at someone's house, so I wasn't going to know everybody. And the conversation came to meditation and transcendental meditation, and how one of the people across the table from me was
satanic.
No, he was like even worse. He taught it, he practiced it daily, and he still apparently thinks Black lives doesn't matter. And my mind was fucking blown, because I was just like, what? I just didn't expect, someone who practices deep meditation to not come to that point where they realize we're all one, like you're supposed to get to that point. I thought it was like going to be like a California person and, like love, peace, and justice for everybody. And we meditate and Buddha. No, it was like meditators who were like right-wing nuts. It still blows my mind.
Some people, I mean, honestly, I've seen a lot of these left-wing movements that are pretty woolly in my view, eventually go right wing. I'm thinking of the anti-vaccination movement.
Right.
but that's not the first. And I mean, David Icke, the notorious anti-Semite who concocted the lizard people theory, I first encountered him at hippie barter fairs on the West Coast in the 1990s.
Yeah, I met him at Left Forum in New York City.
Yeah. So there's always been, I think, any group that is fundamentally conspiracist is prone to this kind of authoritarianism.
But don't you feel like we're being called conspiracists now because of exactly what we talked about a little bit ago? Like,
they like to
be fine. Like the news says everything's fine, and these January 6 people, they're just a handful of folk, and so now you especially live through that, being basically marginalized for your warning bell.
Well, it was some of my marginalization was chosen. I was like,
I gotcha.
I'm disgusted with this business and I want to do something else. Because I left MSNBC in 2000 because I was so disgusted with the way corporate media works. And a lot of this,
now here you are with me.
A lot of this ultimately does come down to corporate ownership. The corporate ownership of the media, because we talk about how the New York Times and people like that are mainstreaming this stuff, but corporate media does it all the time, partly by not really covering it, not being serious about covering it, but ultimately they in particular, especially on the local levels, the local TV, local newspapers, they really downplay all of this stuff because they don't want to
everyone is downplaying it. I live in a community. Now we're talking about me, and yes, the show is going to go past 3 o'clock, so everyone just strap in because we've got our other segment that's going to be awesome too. We'll give you a little extra today since it's their Thanksgiving show. I live in a place where I live surrounded by a group that the right these Christian fascists really hate. You can just imagine it's your people. But I live around there, and we've started to see Trump trucks trying to trespass in the area. And, people with big Trump flags came on Menace night before Halloween. Mm-hmm. They're young people, and the rest of most of the association here was like, well, it's just Menace night. And I'm like, but why are they here with us? They're not just menacing downtown. They're menacing this particular community. And how are you not aware that that this is actually more of a thing than exactly? They're just like, well, they're just boys will be boys. I'm like, are you kidding me? They got a white supremacist flag. Are you going to say boys will be boys when they round up you and put you in the back of the truck? Like it. Yeah. I don't know how to wake people.
Yeah, no, it's really unfortunate, and it's passed off as polarization, but it's not polarization. It's the radicalization of one side. I mean, the left has gone a little bit further left over the last 20 years, but not much. And the right has just gone completely off the cliff. As far
God forbid we should want people to have health care. I can't get more entrenched in the left. Social
Security and Medicare. Oh, those are pretty radical things. Yeah, no, I think what they actually resent, I think when these centrists who say, oh, the left has gone so far left, what they're actually admitting is that they are, guys like Andrew Sullivan, who always basically were fundamentally pretty racist. And that the two things that upset them was I think gay marriage. That's what upset a lot of. That's the one thing that I think a lot of centrists go, oh, the left really went off the deep end with supporting gay marriage, even though gay marriage is perfectly popular and widely accepted now. But initially that was one of the reasons that they would give you for the belief that the left has just gone too far. Mm-hmm. And the other one, of course, now has been fundamentally embracing a social movement to demand police accountability and end racist policing.
How dare they?
Yeah,
Wait.
Sorry, to me that is just basic common sense and basic common decency, and maybe that's the kind of language liberals need to start using, frankly, instead of academic language that calls this, uses, when you start using movement lingo to attack people.
Yeah, movement lingo. Yeah, you're right.
Incredibly ineffective. I think liberals need to get back to using basic everyday language and remind people on the right that no, we're not extremists. We're just ordinary people. We're just your neighbors. We don't want to destroy America. In fact, the nuts you're listening to want to destroy America. They want to end voting rights. They want to end all, just everything that makes, they want to basically enshrine minority rule in the country.
David, a moment ago, I warned you that I was going to ask you to gaze into your very effective crystal ball, because as I do want to repeat that you were the one who put all this on the radar so many years ago and nobody was listening. And now here we are. And you also said at the beginning of this interview that we're in a very precarious position in a very dangerous time, and we're already seeing some of the dangers play out. Given the situation we're in, the political situation, the pandemic situation, just the general, and the fact that this rise of Christian fascism and fascism in general is happening across the world, not just in the United States. What is next? What are we facing?
I think we're facing high likelihood of continued street violence, and not only that, just deliberate attacks on liberal urban centers and the people who live there by right-wing extremists. I mean, that's what all those Proud Boys events were about. That's what Charlottesville was about, and that's what they continue to be about. I mean, you had them marching in New York City this past weekend. Joined up to an anti-vaccination rally, and in LA. So I think we can look forward to, for one thing, what the neo-fascist element, like the Proud Boys, are doing is attaching themselves to local events. But I think there are also going to be some national events that are going to be very threatening. And, it's,
will the media ever start?
The biggest problem, frankly, Julianna, is that law enforcement should be taking an active role in preventing this from happening. And unfortunately, law enforcement in this country has developed a culture that's highly sympathetic to these neo-fascists. And
we're fucked, is what you're saying. Without using the okay. Shit.
Yeah. It's not.
We'll just
not a good time.
One day at a time.
I think we need to. I think we need to be prepared to be strong, because I think that there is going to be some violence coming our way, and I don't think that there actually. It's really in the works, because I just see how these guys are getting all so worked up on social media. And, only very few of them, I'd say 96% of these guys are just impotent fantasists who are incapable of actually causing any harm because they're too stupid and incompetent.
Thank God.
4 or 5% of them were very dangerous. They're people, they've successfully recruited a lot of people from the military. And
that's no good.
And they've successfully infiltrated a lot of police ranks. So I think that there's, and those people are the ones that always cause the damage. It doesn't take very many of them to cause a whole lot of damage. And that's one of the things everybody says. For years, everyone was saying, "Oh, it's just a tiny little movement." You think, how much damage can they cause? This is one of the reasons I would get dismissed. And I would say, look, it doesn't. Just look at Tim McVeigh. It doesn't take very many of them to wreak a whole shit ton of damage. And cause a great amount of harm, not just to the immediate victims and not just to the immediate communities in which it takes place, but ultimately to our entire society and the fabric of the nation, because ultimately fending off authoritarianism requires a democratic government that successfully makes everyone who lives under it feel secure. And if you don't, if you have acts of terrorism and violence going off all the time, people are not going to feel secure. And when people don't feel secure, they flock to authoritarianism as a response. So,
well, with that said, thank you, David. No, we really count on you for this kind of reporting. If we had more time, maybe you'll have to come back for part 2 after Thanksgiving, because I do want to talk about the response from the left, what it could be, what it should be, and what the response from the Biden administration could and should be, and what we can push for. So that's a lot, and I'll reschedule another part 2 after the holiday. Thank you so much, David. I appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
You've been watching me talk with David Neiwert, author of Red Pill, Blue Pill, and how to counteract conspiracy theories that are killing us. He also wrote Alt America, The Rise of the Radical Right in the Age of Trump. I forgot to ask him what else he's working on. I'm sure there will be more. You're watching act.tv. What's the next one? Oh, you're still here? Good. I couldn't see you. What's the next one?
I actually have a proposal that we're working with the publishing house right now. I think they're coming up dealing with the contract for a book that's going to be about the insurgency, the war on democracy. The working title is The Uncivil War, the American Radical Right's Relentless Attack on Democracy. So.
Well, we look forward to reading it, and I hope that by the time it comes out, it's all done and we fixed everything. David Neiwert, thank you so much.